You know, something I've been thinking a lot about lately is it's actually kind of wild just how much the way that we practice and get better at golf has really changed just over the last couple of years. You see, when I really think about it, now with the introduction of golf simulators and launch monitors, etc., about 90% of my total golf practice now actually happens indoors. And I get that I'm completely risking dating myself here, but back when I used to play golf in high school, the idea of having your own launch monitor or simulator at home was something that we couldn't even conceive of. So really the only way to practice was getting out, getting on the golf course, getting on the range. But now we've got a whole new world open to us as long as we can do this new indoor practice the right way. So now with this new world where indoor practice is becoming a lot more accessible to people, I wanted to kind of go over some things that I've been doing personally to kind of get the most out of my indoor practice sessions. And if I am spending so much of my practice time in that environment, I want to make sure that I'm actually getting something out of it. So I want to cover a few things that have been working for me and hopefully some stuff that you guys can put into play in your own practice sessions. All right, so getting into this, first and foremost, in developing this indoor practice plan that I've been using, one thing I wanted is for it to be as effective as possible. And that means two things. One, it's got to cover all areas of your game. But the other thing is making sure that it's effective when it comes to time. Just because we're lucky enough to have a net and a launch monitor or a simulator in our garage doesn't mean we've got all day to practice like so many of the pros do. We're still constrained on time, so practice has to be as effective as possible. So with being efficient in mind, where I like to start my indoor practice sessions is with some wedge work. And there's two reasons. One, I like to warm up with wedges. I think it's a much smarter and safer way to warm up than swinging the big stick right out of the gate. But second, I just find as I journey this, like I said, trying to get better, trying to get closer to scratch, what I'm finding is that so much of whether I'm able to make a par or a bogey really comes down to how close I'm able to get it to the hole with my wedges. I've looked at my shot scope data. I know this is an area where I need to improve. So working on those half swings, quarter swings, really dialing in different distances is just so important. And if there's one spot where you're gonna put, I would say 30 to 40% of your time, it should be around these shots. And using a launch monitor, you can check on things like your spin. That's an indication of things like groove wear and if it's time to get fit for some new wedges, which is something we've done here on the channel as well. There's a lot of information you can gather just from doing some of these wedge sessions. And for me specifically, what I'm using for this practice is the target range in the Rapsodo MLM2 Pro. What I like about it is that you've got lots of different target options there. So I can practice just about every possible wedge shot, just from even those short little half or quarter swing wedges all the way up to a full swing wedge. But one thing that's very important for me to say here is we reviewed all different types of launch monitors, and pretty much all of the major launch monitors out there have some sort of option where you can set shorter targets. And if not, there are also some third-party software, like we've checked out Awesome Golf here before. There you can, again, have different target ranges. No matter what, I think the important thing is just having some sort of target that you can hit towards. And I think that's what gets us away, again, from just beating balls on the range. Hitting towards a target, varying those targets is so important. So I love the target range, but no matter what one you're using, just see if you can find some sort of specific targets and work through those wedges. This, trust me, is an area where if you can get really good, it translates really well out to the golf course and it will help your scoring. All right, so after a good wedge session, hopefully now, you're warmed up. I know for me, I feel like I've got the body moving. I can kind of move on to some other things. And this is one of those examples of something that's not necessarily high tech. In fact, you don't need a launch monitor to work on this area of your game, even though sometimes I will throw it in there. What I'm talking about is chipping, and more specifically, ball striking and technique when it comes to those short chip shots. Again, this is a shot that especially us a little bit higher handicappers, we're faced with a lot when we miss a green in regulation. And then as you guys know, if you don't chip it close, it's gonna quickly compound. You're gonna have more strokes with 2 and 3 putts. So if you can chip it close, if you can work on this, I guarantee you're gonna see those scores drop. But like I said, I do sometimes work in the Rapsodo does give me data on short chip shots. So occasionally if there's something specific I wanna look at, I'll fire it up. But 90% of the time, what I'm really focused on here is just making good, solid ball contact and really focusing on my technique, which can really be done with just a simple mat and a net or something to chip into. So here what I'll do is I'll just take a couple of balls. I'm really lucky enough, I've got this huge mat here and I can go corner to corner for a little bit longer shots, or if I want, I can go with a short chip shot. Again, I'm really not so much worried about that as I am just on technique and contact. So what I'll just do, I'll just work on getting, that ball in the right position, a consistent position. I'll work on getting a lot of weight, just stay there on my lead foot, and then just working on using the bounce, feeling the bounce, and chipping a couple. You can do this higher tech. In fact, I recently did a video talking about the Ball-On insoles, which will measure your balance and your force. And it can be really kind of cool if you want to check in on that. It does get a little bit more expensive. I will link to that video if you guys want to check it out, if you really want to put some aggressive work into it. But more importantly, again, it's just about bringing your attention to it. I think we spend so much time and attention on our full swing that we neglect these important less than full swings. So getting a consistent setup, these are going on all fundamentals, but getting a consistent setup, getting a consistent ball strike, and really starting to understand your wedges and starting to use that bounce properly and letting it glide across the ground. This is areas where, like I said, it just comes down to putting a lot of reps in. And as you get more and more confident with those strikes, it translates out to the course. And, for a lot of us, we're not hitting every green, obviously. So when you do miss a green, being able to chip it close is the difference easily in 1 or 2 strokes on a hole. And that adds up real quick. So this is another area where putting a bit of time, for me, I like to put maybe 10 minutes just into this chipping. It does make a world of difference. All right, so now that we've kind of front loaded the practice session with the short game stuff that I said is so important, just ensuring that we get that done, now is where I'll finally start to move into some full swing work. Like I said, that's something that so many of us just rush to, and then we end up neglecting some of the really important stuff. But that doesn't mean there's not a place for working on your full swing. Where I've found the most impact and the most benefit here is in a very simple and small tweak. And what that is just focusing on one thing at a time. I think it's too easy when you start taking swings to try to have too many swing thoughts and work on too many different things. And this is something that I actually learned from a really good coach, Eric Cogorno, who's got a fabulous YouTube channel. I've been watching him forever. If you haven't checked him out yet, make sure to check out Eric's channel. We got to do some work with him last summer. And one thing I learned from him was this idea of just finding one thing that you want to improve and then putting many, many, many reps into it. So working with Eric, we worked a lot on the takeaway and working on getting my takeaway and club on plane in a good position. And one thing I also learned about the golf swing is a lot of a domino effect. So if you do have a bunch of things that you're struggling with in your golf swing, try to start with the earliest first. And what I mean by that is if you've got a problem with your takeaway, don't just start working on your transition. Get that takeaway dialed first, because there's a good chance that all of these other things that are happening in your swing are happening is a reaction to something that's going wrong earlier on in your swing. That is where these compensations that we make come in, and that introduces inconsistency. So there's a couple ways that I work on this. The first would be the super simple low-tech way is just to grab your phone. On Amazon, you buy like a quick tripod for it, like 15 bucks. You can just record, you can just look at it. Pretty much all devices now have some sort of slow motion option. You can kind of pause it scrub through. Another one that I've used for a long time is the V1 app. There's a free version of that where you can draw, and I can draw some guidelines on the screen for myself, which I like. But even more recent than that, I've recently migrated to using the SWE app. This is something that was just a couple of weeks ago introduced to me by a coach that we work with often, Ryan Hager. And what I like about this is that it does a lot of the heavy lifting of helping with recording, and it uses AI you can just take a bunch of swings and it'll crop each one into an individual swing. But more importantly, what it'll do is it'll spit out a whole list of flaws that it sees relative to the data that it has on pros. And these are all within ranges. So we did a whole video on that with Ryan Hager. You can go and check that out if you want to see a deeper dive, but I found that it just kind of saves me a lot of time. But more importantly is the idea that no matter which of these you're using, just try to work on one thing at a time. And I think that by doing that, you will have a much more linear progression of getting better rather than this up and down of switching from one to the other. So whatever it is, I would say here again, applying time, maybe 20% of the time that you spend practicing can be on full swing and identifying one area where you want to improve, working on that for a couple of weeks, letting that really take hold, that change, and then move on to something else. But the more you can be focused on one thing at a time, and trust me, learning from my own experience and spinning my wheels for way too long, it really does make a difference. All right, so of course, we obviously can't talk about effective practice and getting better and scoring better without talking about putting. And there's a drill that I use that it comes from perhaps the greatest clutch putter of all time, Tiger Woods. It's a drill Tiger's been doing for pretty much his entire career. I've been doing it for years. It's helped me dramatically. You can do it indoors or outdoors. I'm gonna get into that in just a second. But first I wanna cover the fourth thing that I do indoors that has really helped my game. And that has been working on course strategy and navigating the golf course better. And what's so fascinating is this is something we definitely couldn't do indoors before having access to a simulator. And what I really like about this is not only will I use this method in my practice sessions, I'll also use it to prepare specifically to play a certain course. So what that can mean is maybe you've got a big golf trip coming up, new location you're headed to, and you really want to beat your buddies, or maybe you've got a golf tournament coming up, or maybe even you just play your local course all the time and you want more at-bats and chances to play that course. Well, here again is why I like using the Rapsodo. You've got built in there, I think they're up to about 20,000 golf courses. So there's a very good chance they've got your course in there. So let's say, for example, I've got a trip to Sand Valley coming up. Hint, hint, we are gonna be heading there later this summer. And I've never been there before. What I'll actually do is I'll spend some time firing up those courses on the simulator. And if nothing else, I can really start to plan through my tee shots, understanding what club I want to hit off the tee, where I want to hit it, just so I can start to look at what kind of view that will give me of the hole or approaches in. And this way, when I do get out there and play the course, I'm playing it with a little bit more of a strategy and a little bit less blind. While this won't replace completely getting out there and playing the course, it's pretty much the closest thing to it. And we do get to understand, where are the hazards? Where are the misses? Where do I not want to miss on a hole? What could be my aiming direction on this particular hole? You know, what are my yardages? Thinking through the par threes, what clubs might I hit? And I understand conditions change, wind, weather, but at least we can get kind of a ballpark and a game plan heading into it. And trust me, this is a game changer. So whether it's the Rapsodo like I use, or there are a lot of other systems out there that will give you an opportunity to play through the courses, make sure you're using that simulator function and not just hitting balls, but playing some golf. All right, so let's round out this practice session with some putting. Again, something you definitely don't want to neglect. And here again, the equipment is not necessarily as important. In fact, this one you could do as low tech as it gets. You could do this on a carpet. It kind of is similar to what I talked about earlier with chipping, is that you're much more focused on the technique than anything else. And there are a lot of great putting mats and otherwise out there. And if you've got a really good mat, there's a lot more things you can do with it. In fact, another one we recently reviewed was the Putt Out Air Brake, which allows you to practice some breaking putts and other things at home. And that's what gets into a little bit more of a distance control, starting line, things like that. But here, what we're really focusing on is, I think, one of the most important things of any putting stroke, and that is really coming down to striking the center of the face. Because if you're able to strike that center face consistently, you're gonna get a lot more consistent distance control, you're gonna get better rolls. And on the other side of that, if you're missing the center, you're really adding a whole lot more inconsistency into your putting stroke, which is gonna translate to missing more putts and much higher scores. All right, and so the way that this drill works, effectively what you're gonna do is you're gonna set up a gate to putt through. Now when Tiger does it, he puts tees into the ground. I've also done this in my practice outdoors countless times in the past, but I understand that when you're working indoors and you have a mat, not everyone has a mat that you can actually stick a tee into. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll just simply use golf balls. And what you do is you effectively set this gate by setting up your boundaries, in my case, again, using golf balls, just outside of the putter face when it's there at address. And the idea is as you putt through, you wanna make sure that you're not hitting either side of this gate. Because if you are able to pass through the gate without impacting either one of those boundaries, then you know you're hitting center face. And importantly, the way that Tiger has adapted this is, and he likes to do this before every round, and I've seen him and witnessed him doing this on television when they show him warming up on the practice green. He'll actually start with 20 to 25 reps with his right hand only. And that way he feels like he's feeling that putter going through that impact zone and hitting center face with his right hand. And once he's got that, you'll see him then start to do the drill with both hands. So again, just taking a page out of the playbook of Tiger Woods, I will do that kind of same thing. It gives me a feel for the weight of the putter, for the putter head going through that hitting zone, and then I'll put both hands on. And again, here's where you can kind of simulate pressure. You can go for a personal record. How many can you do in a row without hitting either side of the gate? Or just set a number. Can I do 10 of these in a row? And what that'll do is it will start to expose areas of your putting stroke that you might need to work on. You know, is that path too far into out or out to in? Are you turning the face over too much? Are you moving your weight too much and not stable enough in your base that's causing you to hit that? But if you're able to consistently strike that center face, which is what this drill is so great for, you are gonna see much more consistent roll and much more consistent distance control. All right, so hopefully as we look at all of this holistically, this is something that I put a lot of time and thought into. The idea here again is that we are spending time working on all areas of our game so that it can translate to actually out on the golf course and make us a better golfer. What I like about this system is it can really be adapted to how much time you have. Again, most of us don't have maybe more than 30 minutes a day that we can put into working on our game. Again, at least here it's focused practice, which is so important. So if you have any of your own tips, stuff that you've worked on before, I would love personally to hear them. I'm always working on making my practice routine better. So if there's something you've done indoors, share it definitely in the comments. Hopefully you enjoyed these tips and get out there, grind, and trust me, if you do this stuff, you're gonna be a better golfer for it. I know it's really helped my game. Guys, make sure you subscribe and we'll see you in the next one.